ado, but it is time to do a reading wrap up. Let's talk about all of the books that I read last month, as well as the books that I hope to read this month. I know I'm always a little bit behind on my content because I'm a chronological girly, meaning that I like to post everything in the order that I film it in, and right now I have 4 videos I've already filmed that I'm working on to get up. So hopefully this video goes up in August. It will, because I'm gonna catch up, and when it does, we are going to be talking about the seven books that I read in July, as well as the 10 books on my very hesitant mood reading based TBR list for August. I say that because I can never really stick to my TBR list, and I definitely go off of my mood, but when I do that, I always have the best reads. I feel like July might have been my best reading month all year, if not of all time, because I read the most books that I've ever read in a month. I read 6.5 books. I'm still finishing the 7th one, but it counts. And for the most part, I think I had the most consistently high ratings here. On average, every single book was either 4 stars or 5 stars. They all feel like summer. They're all books that I would recommend. I cannot wait to talk about them, and I have so many mood-focused reading books on my TBR list for any type of reading mood that I'm in, and I cannot wait to talk about those as well. If you're new, I make a ton of book-related content, as well as lifestyle, vlogs, and all of that, so definitely stick around and subscribe. I'm going to link my booktube playlist down below, so any book-related video I've ever made is in there. I also do have a Goodreads account if you want to follow me on Goodreads, as well as a book Instagram page, Booking It with Mac. I am super consistent over there, and I love that page so much. My main Instagram, which isn't as exciting, I shouldn't say that about myself, but it's not book related. I also make a ton of booktok videos on TikTok as well. All of these books you can find on Amazon, although I do encourage you to shop at local bookstores or thrift for books as well, but I know sometimes Amazon prices are pretty good when it comes to books, so if you prefer to order them, all of these books are also categorized on my Amazon storefront by books that I've read, summer reads, 5-star reads, all of that you can find over on my Amazon storefront, which I will also link down below. But I know we are all here for the books, and I have so many fun titles to talk about. So let's start with all of the books that I read in July. This is definitely a favorite book month for me, and looking at all of the books that I've read, there are a ton of titles that I would recommend to so many readers. Like I said, I am a chronological girly, so let's start with the first book that I read in July, leading up to the final book, which I am still finishing. So that being said, I have to flip the pile. I think what I loved so much about reading in July is most of these books I primarily read outside, at a cabin, at my pool, under the sun, at a lake, and very little reading was inside. I feel like that elevates the experience. I'm such a summertime girly, and I thrive in the summertime, especially with all of the books that I'm reading. When I read a book outside, it just really captures that time in my life, and so many of my books feel like pool reads because I read them at my pool. I definitely got into a little routine this month of going to my pool around 5:30 to 7:30 in the evenings. I found that this is the time of day when there are the least amount of kids there because of dinner time and bedtime and all of that. So it's quiet, the sun still hits the pool until about 7 p.m. so I still get some sunlight, and I just read at my pool until it gets dark, and then I go into the waiting pool / the hot tub. It's a great routine, and I've managed to read a lot of books with it. Now, the first book that I finished in July was actually Butcher and Blackbird by Bryn Weaver. This took me by surprise. I definitely talk about it a little bit in my June wrap up and July TBR because I was like halfway through it at the start of July. I read this primarily at a cabin in Wisconsin. My boyfriend Ashton and I were in a small town for a wedding on his side of the family, and we all stayed in this beautiful cabin on a vineyard together. It was so nice, beautiful views. I read on the patio or the balcony out there in a vineyard. Like, it was amazing. So if you haven't heard about this book, it's basically about 2 serial killers that kill other serial killers, and guess what? They fall in love. But it's a lot more than that. It's labeled a dark romance, but it's definitely more of like a dark comedy in my opinion, because I am a dark romance girly and I love that genre. This was making me laugh so much. What's really interesting, and I did talk about this in the other video, so I don't want to repeat myself. For like the first half of this book, I was convinced it was going to be a 5-star, and then it lost me a little bit with the romance. Like the serial killing, I was here for. I loved those scenes. It was so interesting to me. I didn't get as grossed out as I thought I would, but I got the ick with the romance. Like some of the things that he did, I was like, why? why are we doing that? And not in like a dark romance way, just kind of like in a, that wasn't hot. And if you've read this, I would love to share more because I'm sure we both kind of had like an icky feeling. Anyway, so I thought it was like a 5-star, then it lost me a little bit, then it got me back a little bit where I was like, okay, yeah, 5-star. And then they would just say something cringy or the dialogue or something would just not hit. So it would go back down to like a 4-star or even lower. It had me toward the end, and then I got to the bonus chapter. Has anybody read the bonus chapter? Because what the heck? I can't even explain it. It was just I was just laughing. Like, this is a dark comedy. It's not a dark romance. If I were to rate it on a dark comedy scale, I think it would be more of a 4-star. Dark romance scale, definitely like a 2-star. So on average, I gave this 3 stars, I believe, or maybe I gave it 4 stars. I would recommend it, but I didn't love it. It hit in so many places, but then it lost me in others, like I said. So it's kind of like a maybe to me if you were to read that. After I returned from the cabin and finished Butcher and Blackbird, I felt like I needed a palate cleanser because I just needed something fresh to read. So I picked up this really small Q&A book called The Buddha Off the Record. And it's basically just a Q&A with Siddhartha. And I believe that his philosophy back then really solidified Buddhism as it is today. This was a nice refresher and it was really easy to read, really short. Most of it, minus the intro and little chapters, is just a Q&A between the interviewer. It goes over a lot of Buddhism themes and beliefs, and it was eye-opening. It talks a lot about enlightenment and meditation. So this was definitely a nice little palate cleanser out of fiction and dark romance and all of these different genres that I've been reading to really cleanse the palate. And I read this outside and it was just so peaceful. I feel like this really grounded me afterwards as well. It's really hard to rate a book like this, so I'm not going to rate it. I don't even know how I would rate a Q&A recorded interview book. I also don't know if I would recommend this. I guess if you're open to it, I'd recommend it, but this isn't a book that I feel like everyone needs to read. There are a lot of other books on Buddhism that I've read that dive a lot deeper, but I think for like a primary source, it was great. The next book I finished in basically 2 days at my pool. It was so gripping, so good. It took me by surprise. I wasn't even going to read it, but I picked it up and I'm so glad that I did. It's Rachel Hawkins' The Wife Upstairs. This is such a great thriller. I didn't know that it was sort of based off of Jane Eyre. It says that the wife upstairs flips the script on Jane Eyre in a timeless tale of forbidden romance, ill-advised attraction, and a wife who just can't stay buried. It has a really interesting plot. I don't think any of the plot twists really got me, but there was a really big one, obviously, where I was like, whoa, I'm so glad that is where Rachel Hawkins took this plot. I read The Villa in June and I really liked Rachel Hawkins' style of thriller writing, so I definitely want to read all of her books, and I'm glad that I picked up The Wife Upstairs next. It was just a very solid thriller in my opinion. I believe I gave this 4 stars. It kept me entertained. I liked the characters. I feel like with thrillers, it doesn't have to be that deep. It just needs to have a good mystery and twist, and that's what this had. So I think I would recommend this to pretty much every single reader. One thing to note though about this book is, like I said, I read this one afternoon on my balcony and then the next day at my pool for hours, and it was super hot that day. I don't even know how to prevent this because it has never happened to me before, but as you can tell, maybe from the binding here, all of the pages came off the spine. They're loose. I have a manuscript basically, because it was so hot and thick and humid that day at my pool, it melted. It literally melted the glue off. I've never heard of this happening before, and it's never happened to me, and I'm at my pool reading a lot. The week that this happened, I saw 2 other people make videos online about how it happened to them. One posted that she left her book in her car when she went to run an errand, and she came back to the car and the book melted off the spine. And then another book girly that I follow mentioned that this happened when she was reading outside as well. This has literally never happened to any of us before, and it happened to 3 people that I'm aware of in 1 week. Are book spines just not as strong as they used to be? Is it the sun? Is it a coincidence? Just be aware, because now I don't know what to do. And I bought this book brand new at Barnes & Noble, so that's great. The next book that I read in July was The Unhoneymooners by Christina Lauren. This was really fun. I think I gave this 4 stars as well. 4 stars to me is just a solid read. It's not a book that I obsessively love and would recommend to everybody, like a 5 star, but it was a good time. It was great. Cannot complain. solid, good read. I like Christina Lauren books. I think they're always like pretty easy to get into. They're nice, easy rom-coms for the most part. And the Unhoneymooners definitely hit in the same way. I chose this book because I knew that it would be an easy beach or pool read, and that's exactly what it was. This was nice to escape into. I also like that this sort of takes place in Minnesota, where I'm from. The protagonist's sister has a wedding, and everybody at the wedding, except for the protagonist, who is the maid of honor, and then the best man, who is her arch nemesis. I hate this man. Enemies to lovers for sure. They're the only two that don't get food poisoning at this wedding. So the bride and groom cannot go on their honeymoon. It's all expenses paid. Cannot change it. Somebody has to go on this trip. The bride sends her twin sister, the protagonist, to go, and the groom sends his best man to go, and they don't like each other, and they have to pretend to be on a honeymoon together in Hawaii. They're both from Minneapolis, so I appreciate all of the little Minnesota like sprinkles in here. You can tell that the writers, Christina Lauren, definitely did their research. I was convinced for a little bit that maybe one of them was from Minnesota, because in Love and Other Words, they also mention a Minneapolis suburb, but the way that they referred to the Twin Cities makes me feel like they're not, because there were some phrases in here where I was like, people from here really don't talk like that, or like call the cities that. But either way, I liked that little snippet in here, and yeah, it was fun. Easy read, 4 stars. The next book that I read might be one of my favorite books that I've ever read. I'm recommending it to everybody. It hit. It was a right book, right time, and it just hit. That is Rebecca Searle's One Italian Summer. I'm so glad that I picked this book up around my birthday with a gift card from my parents, because it is such a beautiful story of a mother and daughter relationship, a summer in Italy. I read this exclusively outside and primarily at my pool, and the only thing really missing was being in Italy itself reading this. I even bought white wine so that I could feel more immersed in the experience, because the way that Rebecca Searle captures Europe and Italy is so beautifully well done. It really does just feel like the cover, and I even tabbed a couple of my favorite parts. This book though, I don't know if I was just super soft the week that I read this or what, but it had me crying by like page 6, because it opens up with the protagonist, Katie, grieving the loss of her mother who recently passed away. So you are just thrown into like a funeral, grieving people, grieving partners and parents, and the loss of a mom. I don't know if losing a mom would make this book harder to read or easier because of where the plot goes, but definitely be aware of that going into this. She doesn't know if she wants to stay in her marriage. Like, that is just chapter 1. But Katie decides to go on this trip to Italy that she planned with her mom, because her mom went to Italy when she was in her 30s or at 30 and always talked about how much she loved it, and she always wanted to go back with her daughter Katie one day. So in honor of her mom, Katie decides to go to Italy, and when she gets there, this is on the back of the book, so I'm not spoiling it, and when she gets to Italy, there's a little bit of magical realism, because she meets her mom as a younger 30-year-old self on that trip to Italy, and it's the younger version of her mom. It is such a fun, cool plot that I have just never seen done in this way before, and it had me crying in so many different ways for so many different reasons. And it's not necessarily sad, but there's so many elements of grief here, and just almost like those conversations. Why am I gonna cry? All of those conversations and moments that like you wish you could have with someone, it's like she got them without even knowing it. Why am I crying? I guess I can't talk about this book without, it's not that sad. I have a friend who DM'd me on Instagram saying that she couldn't even get into this book, and here I am crying talking about it. I also tear up every time I read the quote at the beginning, because the quote is from Gilmore Girls saying she feels like she just needed more time, like raising Rory, and I was, oh my god. I also underlined a lot too, but I just really, really love this plot. I love the way that she writes. Like when they arrive in Italy, she says, "All around me, Italy swells. I feel the air thick with heat and food and memory." I feel the air thick with memory. That hit me so hard, and I feel that in summertime. Or when she sees her mom for the first time. This isn't a spoiler either, because it's on the back. She says, "This is my mother, my glorious, dazzling mother, here, now, in all her glory, unencumbered, I think, by anything that comes after." Or when she takes a picture of her mom in Italy, she says, "I feel a tug of something so deep down inside me, so hidden, I wonder if it belongs to me at all." Like Rebecca Searle's writing, this was my first book by her, but I love it. I'm going back and I'm annotating parts of One Italian Summer because I love it so much. Even rereading some of these parts, I'm crying. There's just a lot that I think anyone can relate to in here, but oh my god. I don't know if I should share any other quotes in here without spoiling parts of the book, but I really enjoyed this book. I gave this 5 stars on Goodreads, but technically I would rate this 4.75 stars. And I talk about it in my Goodreads review because the reasoning has a lot to do with where the plot goes and how it ends. And there were a lot of things I wish that we got more of, but I won't say more than that because I don't want to spoil it for you. But I 110% recommend reading this book in the summer and in Italy if you can. I wish I could read this in Italy, but I read this at the pool with white wine, so I did my best. Very similar to Mamma Mia, but very different. But also, I need a movie of this like now. It's just so fun. There's so many fun book plots that need to be made into movies. We just need more books made into movies for sure. The next book that I read in July is also a favorite, and that is Elsie Silver's Wild Love. This is one of the books that my partner Ashton got me for my birthday that I picked out at a bookstore when we went, if you saw that vlog or TikTok, and I'm so glad that I started here. I was a little hesitant because Elsie Silver has 2 other series. She has the Chestnut Spring series and the Gold Rush Ranch series. This is the first book in the Rose Hill series, and I wasn't sure if I was like supposed to start here. At first I got a little bit nervous, but I'm glad that I did because I loved it so much. I rated this book 4 stars, but it's such a great romance read. I'm Elsie Silver's newest fan. I'm here for it. I loved it. I also love the size of this book. Like, I don't know, give me a nice big thick romance book and I'm here. I just loved Ford and Rosie so much. Rosie is so smart and quick-witted and sassy, and I love the moments where she's kind of sassy and he calls her a brat. It is brat girl summer. She nailed it. She also nailed him. I usually don't have that big of an opinion on the MCMs of romance books, but for some reason, every once in a while, they'll get me, you know, like Elliot in Love and Other Words. I was like, oh my God, I wish. Like, I love their story. I love their connection. I love their history. Ford Grant, if he wanted to, he would. I wish I could say more without spoiling it, but he definitely spoiled her in like outrageous ways where I think I can say that without anybody feeling insecure in real life, because it's like he literally did things that only billionaires can provide, and it was a really fun read. I loved that. I also love the dedication at the beginning because it says, "For all the women who figured out that good enough isn't actually enough. And for those of you who are still looking for more, it's out there. You'll find it, and if not, don't worry, there's always Ford Grant." I love the way that Elsie Silver writes men. Men written by women in general, but she really did such a fantastic job with Ford Grant. You know, there were a couple things that were like maybe a little corny, but for the most part, she did great. Chef's kiss, fantastic. Give me 14 more of these. I cannot wait for Wild Eyes to come out. I'll be reading that as soon as I can get my grubby little hands on them. I loved it. If you like romance books, there's definitely a decent amount of spice toward the end of this book. Nothing crazy, definitely nothing near like dark romances or Her Soul to Take, but it heats up. It's so good. It got me. And this might have just been another example of like right time, right book for me, but I love it. I love the cover. I love everything about it. Elsie Silver, big fan. Speaking of Elsie Silver, the last book that I read in July, I'm still working on finishing it, but it is Flawless by Elsie Silver. This is the first book in the Chestnut Spring series. It's definitely a little bit different than Wild Love, and I'm concerned that I'm going to like Wild Love more, but she wrote this series first, and I do want to read them all. They're just a little bit more like country. And I love country. The trope or dynamic of this one, I don't even know if I talked about the one in here. It's best friend's brother. This one is a sort of like famous bull riding celebrity bad boy that needs his agent's daughter to babysit him. In a way, she's hired to keep tabs on him for PR purposes. And he obviously hates that because he feels like he's being babysat, and she obviously doesn't want to do it either. So it's a little bit of like enemies, but I don't know if they're like heavy enemies, but they just don't get along for that reason. And she's like staying at his family's house with him just to make sure that he is a good boy. And I'm this far into it. We shall see. I have a feeling I'm going to be reading the rest of the series, just banging them out one after the other in August, but I do really like Elsie Silver. So those are the 6 books that I read in July. Overall, definitely a pretty good reading month. Like, cannot complain. Is this video too long to add my TBR list for August, or should I make that a different video? Up until this moment, I've been doing one video for the books that I read in the past month, and then the books that I'm reading in the next month. So it's like a wrap up and a TBR list. Would you prefer that as a viewer, or do you want separate videos where this one is just my July wrap up and the next one is a TBR list? Because I feel like I was very extra chatty in today's video that I could make these 2 videos. Luna, she's sniffing the camera. Everybody's so cozy. Let me know your preference, but I think for an experiment, scratch everything that I said in the beginning. This is just my July reading wrap up. I will film and upload my August TBR list next. We'll try it, we'll see. I have a lot of books. Like I said, I have 10 books on my TBR list for August, so it's gonna be a lengthy video. I'll post it immediately after this one, like in 2 days, so stay tuned. But these are the 6 books that I read in July. Definitely let me know your thoughts if you've read any of these books, or if you have any recommendations based on my preferences of the books that I've read. And then like I mentioned, I definitely recommend most of these books to any types of readers. Everything is listed down below. Thank you so much for watching though. Let me know if you like them split or together. I'm gonna film August's TBR and get that posted as soon as I can. Murney is sat, so we are not going anywhere. I'll see you in my next video soon. Bye.